Good afternoon. I am Pete, also known as Risk for Rewards on Twitter. Currently got around 14,000 followers over there. So if you're not following and you want to follow me for the Cheltenham content, that's at Risk for Rewards over on Twitter. I'm obviously here on YouTube, and today we're getting the videos out first. So if you're not subscribed, if you click the link below, then it will give you a little notification whenever I put a video up. This content won't be going out on Twitter, so this will just be for YouTube. And today is the second edition. Yesterday I gave 10 Cheltenham pointers to try and help you win a few pounds at the festival, and today is the first of 4 more videos which will be covering the Tuesday of the Cheltenham Festival. Just a few early thoughts, a few things of what I'm thinking, maybe a few selections to put in your notebook so that when we get handicap weights, and a few bets that I've already had. I don't want to obviously go diving in really deep and bringing out all the stats and everything, because that's all to come in 4 weeks, and we've got 4 weeks to think about that. But at the same time, you'll want things on your radar. So if your likes of Facile Vega becomes a non-runner, you already know what you might or might not back or on your shortlist. So it's just something also worth bearing in mind. For me currently, I won't be looking at the racing this weekend. I'll be watching it, obviously, for the likes of things like the Ascot Chase to see how it affects the Ryanair market and stuff. But I won't be betting. That's purely because when I start looking at all of those, and I can't concentrate on Cheltenham and the repercussions for results like the Ryanair, whereas this way I can try and be one step ahead. So for the next 4 weeks, there'll be very few bets, and it'll be all Cheltenham focused for myself. So without going on too much, we'll get straight into it. So as I said, it's just going to be a brief outline of a few horses. Obviously, I'm trying to do this with an impartial, unbiased view, because as people know, if you follow on Twitter, my selections are already pinned to my profile from the horses I've backed in the last 11 months. But at the same time, there's a lot of people who are going to come into each race without a single bet. So the perfect place to start is the Supreme Novices Hurdle, because we have only had one selection in the last 12 months, and that's Jet Powered, and Jet Powered doesn't look like it's going to run. So therefore, I have no selection. So it's a perfect race to have an unbiased opinion. For me, it's brilliant because of the fact that I didn't get very burnt with the whole Facile Vega. I mean, I looked at the price for him to win at the Dublin Race Festival and to win at the festival, and it was 6-4. I mean, that is next level awful, even if you're the next superstar. The thing with Facile Vega is, as a lot of people know on Twitter, I pride myself quite heavily on being able to spot the next superstar quite early on. I did it with quite a few on the flat last year. I had 3 out of the 4 classic winners, like the 1,000, 2,000 guineas, picking the horse like Caribus at 16-1. And Facile Vega, I had him for the bumper at 20-1, but he just doesn't, like, I'm not saying he won't turn out to be a very good horse, but there's just something that doesn't spark me. He doesn't look like, I don't look at him and think he's like the next Willie Mullins, Vitor. Like, he doesn't travel that sort of way. Like a Gaelic Warrior travels more like a standard Willie Mullins horse. I'm not saying that he is going to be one, especially with his issues, but I'm just saying that Facile Vega is not, he doesn't travel like really strongly behind the bridle. He's not an impeccable jumper. It's not a question of like how far. And I think it's wrong the way he's been priced up and he's been picked at due to that. Now he's a much more realistic price. So you have to assess him as if you haven't seen any of this. And the only thing you're going on really is his champion bumper form. And the champion bumper form has not worked out great whatsoever. So the issue for Facile Vega is, me personally, is will he even make the festival? I know he's come back lame. He had an issue, and he clearly over-raced, racing way too freely. Those sectionals, you could see on the TV, he didn't even need a clock. And as I flagged up on Twitter straight after, like, they were lengths and lengths ahead of the champion hurdle that was slowly ran. But at the same time, and Gaelic Warriors race, they were miles ahead of that. Put it this way, in simple terms, Facile Vega was pretty much all but pulled up in his race. But if you put the screen on screen like they did on Racing TV, Facile Vega still crossed the line before Gaelic Warrior over the same distance, carrying the same weight. Or, sorry, maybe not the same weight. It would be maybe a couple of pounds difference, because obviously he was in that top weight in the handicap. It won't be far. There won't be a lot in it. And he still passed before. That's just how fast they were going. He had enough time to slow to almost a complete stop and still go faster than the handicap. So I think for me, I think he has got a lot of questions to answer, but his price reflects that now. I mean, he was probably going to be an even money shot. He probably, after the DRF, if he'd won, he'd been 4-7 here. So he's now 10-3. Do I want to back him at that price? No, not really. I want to sit on 4 weeks of thought process and work out. He has got some of the best form in the race. He has beat his rival here, Ilete Tomps, and he beat him well. But the question mark would be, going on to that rival, is was Ilete Tomps really put in that race on debut? And my answer probably was no. because he travelled in behind Facile Vega. Facile Vega had an easy lead, left out in front. Astro Diamond obviously did not want to win the race because she didn't want to pick up a penalty before going to the Solarina. So she sat out the back and was road cold. Elite Tomps exactly the same, and it was a nice little schooling race for everyone. However, what was interesting with Elite Tomps is he wasn't in the heat of the battle. He was more than happy to let them go on and say, I'm not getting involved with that. But at the same time, he wasn't hard pulled. So he wasn't 3 or 4 lengths he was 3 or 4 lengths off the pace, but it wasn't like he was like really outpaced. It wasn't like watching the Supreme again, where you've got horses like about 10 lengths back paddling water. He was travelling well. He just was happy to let them go on. I think part of that was because of the fact that Danny Mullins was on such a cloud nine from the way he'd been riding. He chose his judgment over theirs and said they're going too hard. And he even let Rachel go on in the pocket. When they were both together, he just said, okay, I'll let her go as well. And he picked it up and it was a beautiful ride. And the question is trying to work out where in between is the fact his times were brilliant. They were faster than State Man's. Obviously, that was a slowly ran race. And they were also miles, as explained, they were much faster than the likes of Gaelic Warrior in the handicap. So he's clearly a top class operator, and Willie Mullins has been very coy with the way he's managed to obviously keep him as a novice. It's it's not cheating, but it's a proper gamesmanship, sneaky rule that he's done with quite a few of his horses this year, where he's kept them as novices, having only tried them in the highest caliber of race. They've had an extra year of experience, a couple of hurdles in the top races, and look at it now. Like Elite Tomps, you argue in reality, he should probably be favourite for this race or joint favourite with the other horse, Marine Nationale. So Elite Tomps is very interesting for me. Of the two, if you said you've got to back one right now, I'd rather back Elite Tomps over Facile Vega. But in 4 weeks' time, if the rain comes, if we hear positive vibes, and if we start digging into the form, my form may sway. Marine Nationale, very interesting horse. Obviously, Barry O'Connell can't have this beat. He seems a very confident man himself, and he has had good horses, the likes of Arkle in the past. So he knows when he's got a good one, and he's been banging up the rafters saying this will win. And it's very interesting from a long way out that they chose to skip the Dublin Racing Festival, not take on Facile Vega, and go there fresh. So his form, obviously, in winning the Group 1, beating Irish Point. At the time, I thought that was Irish Point on the upgrade. I thought it was a horse going places, could well go up to the next level. And I thought he beat a very good, like a 98% sort of ready Irish Point. And that was a good race. Obviously, tucked in behind was Astro Diamond. And arguably, I'd say she was travelling the best coming into the final 2 hurdles. But as I said before, I think they were keen not to pick up penalties. Therefore, they weren't hard pushed. And once the race was gone, she was nudged in behind. I think she finished 3rd or 4th. So Irish Point's obviously gone to the DRF and finished behind Goodland, absolutely lapped, like nowhere to be seen. So I wouldn't knock Marine Nationale too much for that, but at the same time, his form outside of that, like it's not spectacular. Like the beating of Astro Diamond and Irish Point on what we've seen so far isn't fantastic. So again, should he be favourite? Not too sure. We go down the line. Impere Pass, I think Willie in his head has Facile Vega as his A-team player. Elite Tomp is his A-team substitute / also his A-team player for the Supreme now. Impere Pass, I think, is his Ballymore, one of his A-team players for the Ballymore, along with Gaelic Warrior. So I'm not going to cover that. I don't think Lucia will go here. Timoras is becoming like the dark horse, the sleeper horse. Everyone's associating with Malfaroff and Noland. And whilst I could see it, at the same time, like, I don't know. Like, as in, he travelled very well that day. It could be in stacks of improvement. But put it this way, if Lucia had gone to the Tolworth, I would find it very difficult to not see that Lucia would have absolutely whomped him, especially the way he walked through the last hurdle. My personal perspective is, I think if Timoras was coming here having finished second, say, I don't know, 8 lengths beaten by Lucia, and obviously that's not guaranteed to have happened, but just from my personal opinion, I think he'd be an even bigger price, and would you still be talking about him? So it's a hard one to assess. I'm not saying he can't win. I think he'll suit a bit more ground conditions. Divergis is the dark horse of the race. It was mentioned by Willie Mullins the other day as a supreme horse, but he's only had the one run where he absolutely bolted up, so he fits in the could be anything category. And he's one of those that if the money starts coming on the day, you start thinking, hang on a minute, the yard clearly knew what they had. They were just waiting for the time. High definition, not a horse I particularly liked on the flat. Don't like him any more in the jumps. If they let him get out free and he actually manages to get out and get going, then he's a massive player. But at the same time, he clattered 2 of the first 4 hurdles when he was against Facile Vega. He showed he had no restraint when they both went off at 100 miles an hour. So, like, to me, they're just trying to be a flat horse. He's trying to run at flat speeds, but over hurdles without actually jumping the hurdles. So I couldn't have him on my mind. If he got a soft, easy lead and he managed to like get going, then I'd understand. But I'll be disappointed if there's not something better. And then Hunter's Yarn, I just don't think he's good enough personally. If he wins, okay, I'll accept it, take it on the chin. He will not be taking any of my money in the novice hurdles. I thought he was set for some of the nice handicaps before winning the other day, but the beating of American Mike and the likes, like you've got horses currently at the moment all over the place running for handicaps, and American Mike wasn't running for a handicap. American Mike was running to get in somewhere good at Cheltenham, and he's just not the horse. In my opinion, I don't think he's the horse that everyone expected he would end up being. And even though Gordon Elliott's taken good positive vibes from it, not for me. So in my personal opinion, in summary, obviously that wasn't particularly the shortest of summaries. The Supreme Novice Hurdle is, if you're very strong on the likes of Marine Nationale, Elite Tomps, Tamuras, or a Diverge, like one of those at the front end of the market, or even obviously High Definition, then I would not put you off taking that price now. Because in my head, I have a feeling like Facile Vega, maybe 70-30 would be to make the festival, maybe less. I would not be surprised at all if suddenly you started seeing a market drift on a Monday morning, or he just said, oh, he's not going to be back in time or whatever, and he doesn't go. And then it won't change a lot for Mullins because he's got quite a few Supreme contenders already in the market now, and he'd be happy with rolling with Elite Tom. If he can get him remotely ready to go, then he will. But at the same time, when you finish lane, you knew he had a hard race because it was an awfully run race. So I'm not 100% sure. As I said, probably 70-30, maybe even 60-40 that he turns up. So, but if you're a Facile Vega backer, at the end of the day, I'm not going to stand there and say he can't win in it, because that is very much not the case. Of course he can. But there is obviously that doubt with that run, and also the fact of him turning up. So if you're strong on something, then take it. Me personally, I'm just going to let the race develop for a few weeks, wait to see what sort of ground we get, wait to see what the vibes are and stuff. And I think a lot of the market will suit itself out. And I think it'll be very much like an old school Supreme, where we'll be 3 or 4, 4-1 the field, and the bookmakers will be saying, we'll give you six runners each way places, all the works, because no one's going to know who's going to win. Currently on the exchange, it's 4-1 the field. And here it's 10-3 and then 4-1 upwards. So come the day, I think it'll be 3 or 4-1 the field, and it'll be like you'll have a pick 'em. If Facile Vega doesn't run, obviously they'll short them up, but it would not surprise me because they won't know who's going to win. They'll push them back out again. There isn't going to be a standout 6-4 shot in this. So to me, there's no rush. But if you are very strong on like a Marine Nationale or whatever, I would not put you off taking the price and topping up or doing whatever you want to do. But for me, I've only got one bet. It's not going to run, so I'm going to happy to just sit it out and wait until close to the time. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum is the Arkle chase. So the Arkle chase obviously had a lot go on in the last, 3 weeks in reality. Had nothing, and then it's all happened in very quick succession. El Fabiolo is now the rightful Fav, but having been backed into 11-10, he's now sat at 6-4. John Bon, having been pushed out to 2-1, is now back to 7-4. So it would not surprise me come the day that they go off 6-4 joint favourites. So if you got on the ante-post, we've got 4-1 John Bon, 7 or 8-1, whatever you took on El Fabiolo, then you're laughing really, because I'd be very disappointed if one of those two didn't go close. And then our third player was Dysart Dynamo. Myself, I could only take 12-1, but 20-1 was available for those who have got a couple of the accounts, but I just obviously couldn't, and I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I've got a price that I haven't got. I'll put it up once I've taken my price, and then if people can get the bigger price, that's brilliant. It's just I don't get that luxury. So for me, it's a 3-horse race, and I mean that as a 3-horse race. Everyone's going to come here and tell you it's a 2-horse race. The thing that a lot of people won't consider with Dysart Dynamo is that Dysart Dynamo at the Dublin Race Festival, that was over 2 miles, 1 furlong, so an extended extra furlong. Whereas the Arkle is over 1 mile, 799, 7 furlongs and 799 yards, something like that. Obviously, I haven't got any notes. This is all off my head, so I'm just sharing. But it's short of 2 miles, is my point. If you go back and you wind back to the Dublin Racing Festival and you go to the last hurdle, if you pause that screen, there's only one horse still on the bridle, and that's Dysart Dynamo. El Fabiolo is being pushed along, and Appreciate It is being absolutely ran ragged, and Banbridge is not even in the picture. So with that extra furlong shorter, and also with the fact that they're still learning. I'd love it if Danny Mullins was riding again. So he's still learning on him, and he's trying to harness that speed. And you don't get a lot of option. It's a little bit like Under So, but they're trying to harness as much as they can and then let him go. this could end up quite being like almost like for people who have watched racing for quite some time, there was a race, a champion hurdle, where it was billed to be Binocular versus Hurricane Fly, and those two stalked each other throughout the race, but they left Rock on Ruby out in front, and Rock on Ruby they didn't give the credit to, and I think that'd be very much the same here because El Fabiolo has already beaten Dysart Dynamo, as has John Bon. So I'd imagine they'll give Dysart Dynamo a free lead unless physically John Bon as a horse won't be headstrong enough to say, I've got to lead. I'd imagine Dysart Dynamo will be off on his front. And if they give him too much rope and they spend too much time looking at each other, it would not surprise me if he ends up having enough left in the canister to see it home. So write him off at your peril. The only issue with that is when I first thought of this process, like that was straight after the DRF, I thought originally, and I looked at all the distances and stuff, and Dysart Dynamo was in double figures. However, a lot of people have not cottoned onto that theory that I've just said, but cottoned onto the theory that this field is going to cut up dramatically, and there could only be like 6 runners. So currently the bookmakers have put him all the way into 5-1. So he's 5-1 because they know that then if you pay each way, they're literally giving you money back. That's it. And Dysart Dynamo could be one of those horses where he either finishes first or he finishes last, because obviously he's gone too hard. But you look through the field and you've got Appreciate It going Turners, Haddocks de Zobo possibly Grand Annual, Banbridge going Turners, and then St. Roy wasn't good enough. Sir Gerhard's going Turners or Brown Advisory. Boot Hill won't be good enough. Phil Dorr was nowhere near good enough at the DRF. Flame Bearer. So you've literally got, in reality, those 3 runners, and possibly Haddocks de Zobo, but he's got a good mark and could go to the Grand Annual. So that's why he's shortened in at the moment. I think he will grow to a bigger price on the day because the money will come for the front 2. And the front 2, obviously, they are the leading credentials. I'm not going to knock that about. And I would not put anyone off, if you're one of those who likes to get ahead of the game, I would not put anyone off doing the Arkle Champion Chase double for those 2 when the prices start coming out, like on the week of the thing, like El Fabiolo to win the Arkle and the Champion Chase or whatever. It might be like, I don't know, 14-1 or 20-1 or something ridiculous. Because the Champion Chase mark, as we can all see, is very windy and all over the shop. And whilst these 2 don't look raw, like really raw 2-milers, like the Sprinter Sacra, like travelling all over the type, like they both have got a lot of. They could easily both be running at 2 mile 4. They both stay. They both find off the bridle. El Fabiolo in particular is a very raw horse. He comes here only having had 2 starts. On his first start, he was novice at plenty of jumps, and on his second start, he absolutely clattered the 4th last at the DRF. But it was like a kid running in a playground. He tripped over, bumped his knee, and then just got up and carried on. It didn't stop his momentum in any sort of way. But you just hope that they learn from those mistakes. And I think this race could be decided in something like that, in the fact that if John Bon can get into a rhythm and we see the jumping that we saw, not including last time out, before that, where he was inch perfect, like he was almost like skipping every single fence. If he met it wrong, he was still getting past it. He looked much more like his half brother Duvan. And if he can get out and he can start doing that sort of thing, and the pressure goes on to El Fabiolo, if he clatters one, he's not going to get the sort of luxury he did at the DRF. In reality, the DRF is how you assess the form. So for me, it is easily the best piece of form on offer we've got this year. But at the same time, when you pull it back, he's beaten Banbridge 10 lengths, who we all know was going to be a 2 mile 4 minimum horse, and they were talking about 3 miles at the end of last year. He's beaten Appreciate It, which in my personal opinion, I don't really rate Appreciate It. I know plenty of judges do. I think he's had his time and he's aging and he's struggling, and he also would have needed a minimum of 2 miles 4. He's beaten Dysart Dynamo, which he got to in the last furlong, and to overcome him and go past. And then the rest of the field, obviously, is what it is. So whilst it is the strongest piece of form, he only really beat 1 2-miler, in my personal opinion, and that was Dysart Dynamo, who always goes off too hard. And as I've said, he does have a chance to get a bit closer if he can be a bit more reserved. So he does have the best piece of form, and I did like his attitude. Like he's a lovely horse, and I could easily see him being a horse that steps up in future. But at the same time, he should be the rightful favourite for this race, no doubt in that, because he's got the form, and it's also he's got the form with John Bon from back at Aintree, where he was inexperienced, only going there on his second run. He made that mistake, and then obviously he headed John Bon, but John Bon showed brilliant grit to get back up. So whilst El Fabiolo had the inexperience, the other side of the boot was the fact that John Bon had just had a really hard race at Cheltenham 3 weeks ago, but he did have more experience in him, and John Bon also showed that he likes a fight. And that's one thing we learned last time. It was just a reminder, Going back to last year, John Bond's worst race was at Haydock when it was a gritty win before the Supreme, and he's done exactly the same here. Like, I'm not going to go dive into that race because I still don't know what happened, why they were doing it. I could see like the way he was trying to teach him, and it wasn't very impressive. And I think that's why, obviously, well, it's not. I think it is why his price is what it is now. But these two are so difficult to split. So I'm really glad that obviously we've got our anti-post position. For people coming to the race now, I'd say just sit on it for 4 weeks, watch racing, have a look round, see what you think, wait for ground conditions, because come the day, like, you're not just going to wake up the next day, unless one of them's a non-runner, you're not going to wake up the next day and one's going to be 1-2 and one's going to be 3-1. They are probably both. It would not surprise me if they're boosted. One company boosts them one way, one company boosts the other way, and you're getting anywhere from 6-4 to 2-1, something like that, maybe even 5-2. I think they'll both end up going off around the 6-4, 7-4 mark, maybe one slight favourite over the other. So if you haven't backed anything in the race, I wouldn't rush to. But obviously, for me personally, I think those three are the ones to look at. Dice like Dynamo, you can't really do anything with now because he's now gone into 5-1. So if the front two of the market money comes, then you want to get your cover bet on him, then you'd want to be doing it on the day rather than now, or unless you want to go for an each way bet to nothing if it's a 4 on a field. But like I said, he's very much an all or nothing horse. He could end up pulled up or on the, well, I say on the deck, but he's been a brilliant jumper, so I'd like to think that he wouldn't end up on the deck. So anyway, two big races. That took a lot longer than I expected. On to the Ultima. So the Ultima, I'm not going to go through all of this now because obviously we don't even have the handicap weights. The only horse I've still got on my radar was Indigo Breeze, currently, who ran for us at the Dublin Racing Festival. And the form that I was holding him was his run against the Real Whacker. When he raced against the Real Whacker around Cheltenham, they literally just went head to toe the whole race, and it looked like Indigo Breeze was just going to go past him at some point. He travelled better than him, but when Real Whacker kept pushing, like Indigo Breeze was still in the bridle. But the problem is that he kept pushing, and then eventually Indigo Breeze came off, and the Real Whacker just kept continuing to find more. So the Real Whacker's now, I think, £14 higher. He's rated £14 higher than what they both raced off on that day. So that technically would give Indigo Breeze £14 to be well in, which is a sort of amount that you need to win this sort of handicap. That is why I thought the Dublin Race Festival, here we go, you're in, plus you'll have your Irish mark rather than your English mark, so you couldn't be any more well in. However, he wasn't ridden prominently, he wasn't given much of a chance, and he was ridden out the back. So therefore, he remains on the radar. We see what mark he's given to come over here. We see if there's who the jockey's going to be, and we go from there. But he is very much on the radar because he's clearly still got at least probably minimum £10 in, which is what you need to win a handicap here. Know that he likes Cheltenham. He's ran a very good race with the Real Whacker, and whether you weight that horse or not, he's 4-1 favourite for the Brown Advisory currently. So the form is there, and if he's a Group 1, if he could be a Group 1 horse, I'm not saying he is personally, I'm not a fan of him, but at the same time, he's clearly done it at the top level, and so I think Indigo Breeze has to still be on the radar. So he's on the radar. There are a few more, but I'm not going to go into them all because they won't get declared. They'll get different weights and all sorts of things. So with the handicaps, I'm just going to give you a couple on each, just to keep an eye out for. So, sorry. On to the race of the day, and that is the Champion Hurdle. All I hope for on this occasion is that we all get to see the race that we want to see. So what I mean by that is that we don't have a lossy mouth situation where something happens. We don't have either of them fall. We just get to see the race. It would be the biggest disappointment of the festival if we, for whatever reason, Constitution Hill fell or didn't run his race or anything like that. Me personally, there's no reason not to. My biggest concern with this race is I'm looking at the decks now in front of me, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10. There's 14 potential runners. And if I work in going past the front two, Willie's already said Vauban's probably not going. Echoes in Rain is likely to go to the mares, and there's 33s for this currently. Epitaph is the same, but one of them two or both of them might come here if there's nothing. Honeysuckle is already said they're going to the mares. First Street could run here, runs this weekend, may not even run at the festival. Love Envoy's going to the mares. Sharjah could run here, but he's not done anything really this year. And then you've got I'd Like to Move It, who's obviously racing this weekend as well, and then Pied Piper. So like this race, like we could actually end up with the same as last year in the Turners, where we have the two big guns and then maybe one or two, or maybe even the two big guns. So, right, so in a normal occasion, I'd say that's going to absolutely wreck the race because there's going to be no one. And if I was Nicky Henderson or Willie Mullins, I'd be thinking, why have I not got a pacemaker in here? Someone who I know is a very reliable jumper who can go out, set the pace, and make sure it's a good race. And neither of them have, because you're not going to waste a horse like Echoes in Rain or Epitante doing that. If those two are in it, they're in it to get a place in behind in third. So, but the difference is the fact that State Man has been ridden from the front, likes to dictate, and will do a slow pace. Constitution Hill is happy to go from the front. So we could end up just having a straight up gunfight. It could just be 4 runners in the race, both of them go off, and that's it. All guns blazing, let's go. So, to be honest, I'd hold my hands up and say, I really do not mind. I'd love to see 8 runners, and it'd be like a champion hurdle like last year with Honeysuckle. But without the runners, it takes away the fear of someone bringing down another. Like you forget last year, if Constitution Hill hadn't sidestepped Dysart Dynamo at that time, Constitution Hill would have gone down in the Supreme. John Bond would have won the Supreme, and then we've got no idea what would have happened. John Bond could have been the horse in the Champion Hurdle tree, and then we could have seen Constitution Hill over the Arkle. Like you've got no idea what would have happened. So we were fortunate that last year, and I just don't want to see a repeat of anything similar this year. So I'd rather see a horse that not in there than see, but that's not to disrespect other runners. Like if they're in there, then obviously they're in there. My personal opinion is, like, I know everyone's on Constitution Hill, and that is my opinion. I think this horse is going to be a superstar. I wouldn't be backing him for the Champion Hurdle next year because I think the connections, this 3 months has been a long 3 months of them waiting. I think they want to run this horse. This is a horse like a Sprinter Sacre. They want to show everyone at Punchestown, at Aintree, like how good this horse is. They won't overdo it because Nicky will never do that after what happened with Sprinter Sacre. But at the same time, next year, I would not be surprised if he goes to the Arkle or if he goes straight for, like, as in does a couple of novice races and then suddenly they talk about the Champion Chase, or he goes for a novice chase season and then goes straight up to a Champion Chase season and then goes from Champion Chase up to Gold Cup. Like the way they talk about this horse, the way he looks at this horse, and the fact that he's even mentioned, people have mentioned, oh, could he be like a sprinter? And Nicky said, oh, it took me this amount of years to say Sprinter Sacre was the best I've trained, stuff like that. The fact that these even get mentioned in the same breath, and the fact that they're having to use 2 different workhorses at home to have someone give him his first toe into the race and then someone give him his second toe. My only concern would be the fact that he's off 3 months, but that didn't stop him at Newcastle. That wasn't an issue whatsoever. And the way this race could pan out, Constitution Hill would go from the front. I don't think State Man would ever pass him. State Man would go from the front, and I think Constitution Hill will pick him up. I just will be disappointed if he doesn't turn out to be the star that he is. I think State Man's a good horse, and I totally respect him, but I just think he's bumped into one in a tough year. But if there's a horse that you like here, in the background, like say like a Pied Piper, like you could easily, he's 66s, you could be picking up money there, or a Sharjah or a Jason the Militant, 100 to 1. Like if you know that a horse is going to run here, like I'd take a swing at the each way if you fancy that. For me, I just want to focus on the front. I don't want to be looking to see what's placed or anything like that. And as for everyone, I really hope I will be there on the Tuesday, and I hope all of us are stood in that paddock seeing an absolute superstar, and that's him, the start of his stardom that we're about to see. So bringing us on to the next race, we've got the Mares' Hurdle. This race has been the absolute talking point of everyone for the last 6 weeks. Some people hate it, some people love it, some people complain that horses are going here. Like, you can complain all you like, but this Mares' Hurdle is bringing very good horses and good mares into the game, likes of Annie Powers, the Honeysuckles, Benny Dejew. Like, it's not a waste of time. Like, people say, oh, get rid of the Mares' Novices, oh, because then they wouldn't do a year here, wouldn't do a year as the Mares and all this sort of thing. And you're just like, hang on a minute, you're like, there's so many races you could scrap. Like, horses go for a bumper, they do a year in bumpers. What's wrong with doing a year in Mares Company, whether it's Mares Hurdles or Mares Novices? Like, it's no different to you doing a year in bumpers rather than just going straight for your novice hurdles. For some mares, it is brilliant for their education. Like Honeysuckle, it's not harmed her whatsoever, was it, taking in a Mares Hurdle? So I'm all for the mares. There's so many races you could scrap. Some of the handicaps, like the Pertemps and stuff. Oh, get in the first 4. What, in a 7-runner race in the UK? Notice the Irish aren't coming over because it'd be so obvious when they're trying to sneak in the 4th when the race is that poor and they win it by accident. So, rant over. Anyway, back to the mares. Like, this race is absolutely brilliant, but it's only going to be brilliant if the horses end up turning up. Like, it could be all over the shop. My personal view, Honeysuckle, I won't be backing her for any race. I'll cheer her on when she comes into the paddock, when she comes round, and I'll cheer her when she comes back in afterwards. And if she wins, obviously I will roar and cheer her as well. But she will not have a penny of my money. The same with the Dublin Racing Festival. If you're backing her, you're backing heart over head. She's not the horse she once was. It was a career low that she ran to last time, way below what she'd shown in the past. And yeah, she might not have finished far behind State Man, but that was not like, it's not the honeysuckle that we're used to. She just doesn't have that injection that she's. Yeah, Cheltenham could light her up and all sorts of things, and she could end up running a big race. But I'll be disappointed because these, in a normal year, maybe, but some of these are very good horses. So next up, and that's 5-2. So she's a no for me. Epitante 4-1. So she's more interesting. She's obviously from a similar honeysuckle mould in the fact that she's been around the block for a long time, past champion hurdle winner. Strong form, chasing home Constitution Hill twice, albeit 12 lengths plus, and obviously bolted up against her own sex last time, which just shows that obviously when she's in her own sex, she's a Group 1, she's a race above. For me personally, that's the race at Aintree. She was phenomenal last year. So, like, I would have thought, okay, you could have gone there. The thing with Epitante is she could well end up in the champion hurdle for the reasons I've just said. Is the fact that if I don't think Henderson would have expected Vauban not to be going, which means that third place is massively up for grabs, and also it could suit the pace, the race setup and stuff like that, having her in there. Will they take the opportunity? Is third in the champion hurdle better than finishing first, second, third in the mares? I don't know. Epitante's interesting. I haven't quite decided on her because at the same time, she's not going to be improving anymore. She's just going to be at the level, but she's not going to be at champion hurdle level. It's just whether you think her level of finishing placed in last year's behind Honeysuckle and stuff like that is good enough. I think the front two are both questionable. The horse that I don't think is questionable is Marie's Rock. The only thing that is questionable is whether she turns up for this race. There have been so many heated discussions, and I've seen people on Twitter, the syndicate, people who are parts of the syndicate, having vocal discussions about how they are almost certain that they want the horse to go to the mare's hurdle to defend her crown. Like last year, she was a multiple Group 1 winner, and she took this and the Punchestown Festival mare's hurdle. So this year, and she raced, I think it was 7 times she raced last year, and she was brilliant for them. They got to go to the races all the time, win all these big races. This year, she was brilliant in the Real Kill against the boys at Christmas, but this is only her second run. So the problem is, we know she goes well fresh, but are you really going to think that basically you've got to make your arrows count? If you're only deciding that she'll probably have maybe 1 more run. So the maximum she's going to run is 3 at very most, unless she does all 3 festivals, which is unlikely. She'll run 3 times this year. So you have got to make your darts count. So I think they've got a massive, massive decision to be made. At the moment, she's proven over the trip. She's already beat Epitante, albeit Epitante would have been below par because it was the end of the season. She didn't really run a race. Honeysuckle's on the downgrade, and Marie's Rock is continuing to improve. You know she's come out of her race well and fresh, and she's the reigning champion from last year. And she not only beat them here, she beat them over in Ireland as well, which is very rare that we see one of the English horses go over and do the job over there as well. So she literally has nothing to prove. However, they just seem so keen on this whole Stayers idea. Henderson seems to think it's very weak. Me personally, I'll cover that in the Stayers video, but the Stayers has got a lot busier in the last 2 weeks, and it's a lot more competitive than it looked. And also, it just reminds me so much of, I'm sure it was, obviously I'm doing this off the top of my head, I'm sure it was Annie Power. We had this same sort of situation. Willie Mullins had a very good horse in the mares who he expected to win it with. So he stepped Annie Power up for the Stayers, and she went to the Stayers instead as a short price favourite, and she bumped into At Fisher's Cross. And At Fisher's Cross was on a going day for Rebecca Curtis and managed to get the better of Annie Power. Annie Power did finish second, so second in the Stayers, still good. But it's just the fact of that was, they said, oh, well, she's done 3 miles in the past, like point to point or whatever, so she'll stay and stuff like that. And it proved that while she was still good and she was at a very, very high level, like she wasn't as good as she was at shorter trips, as we saw later on when she won a champion hurdle. So my point is, like, it's a big risk, in my personal opinion, going up in trip for a race such as the Stayers when you know that you've got a horse that will run their guts out for this. And yeah, I get it. You've got to juggle with other connections in the yard, and that's their issue, not mine. So me personally, I think she's the one to beat and she should be the favourite, but I can understand why she's sat at 4-1 now with all the question marks about whether she'll actually turn up to the race. Speaking of question marks, brings us beautifully onto the next horse, Brandy Love. Brandy Love is sat at 9-2, shorter than Love Envoy, Echoes in Rain. Considering she's not been seen at all yet, I think that's quite a disservice, especially to Love Envoy. Considering Love Envoy took her on at the end of a very hard season, having danced every dance and won the Mayor's Novice last year, whereas Brandy Love was only on her third run of the season, having come second in the Solarina, um, behind her stablemate Allegoria Devassi. And on that day, Brandy Love literally drove out to the car park, came back round, and then finished a couple of lengths behind. So she has got that issue where she not only jumps out, but she goes off trotting out to the left. So the left-handed track will suit, no doubt, at Cheltenham. But she's got D-Day coming up next week, because Willie has said that she'll go to the Q Vega if she's ready. If she's ready, then obviously we'll see her there. If she's not declared, then that's when things start getting interesting, because it goes back to my Facile Vega. Willie Mullins is renowned for, oh, we're not going to make it, but she'll be back for Punchestown, as if it's not a big deal, whereas all the punters that have backed her are absolutely seething. But he gets the best results because he doesn't do what people want him to do. He does what he thinks is right for the horse. She is a huge player if she makes it here. Obviously, the beating of Love Envoy, albeit I think Love Envoy was at the end of a very hard season on very fast ground. But it just shows there's not a lot between the two of them. I think Love Envoy comes in with a better prep, albeit she had to miss last weekend. But I think Brandy Love, you need to get a run into it. I know people will say, well, he's done it with Q Vega. I think back then the mares' races were a lot less competitive. Q Vega was taking on, like, in some of her races, she was taking on handicappers or horses she'd beat the year before that hadn't got anywhere else to go, so they just turned up again. Whereas this year, you've got so many unexposed potential horses going in, and then you've got ex-champion hurdle horses who are trying to prove they're not so regressive. So Brandy Love becomes on my radar to try and work out whether to back or what to do with, but not until you see her at the racetrack, or you then start thinking, is she actually going to be declared? If she's not there next week, then you'd think, is she going to turn up in March? And Willie Mullins is a master, but that is some performance if he can get her to win straight up, especially if the likes of Marie's Rock doesn't turn up. If Marie's Rock doesn't turn up, it's quite an open race, with Honeysuckle and Epitante being quite, not regressive, but not at their peak. And then the other one that I really like is Love Envoy. Love Envoy's done everything you could ask of her. She's improved again this year. Last year she was phenomenal. She won the Mayor's Novice, taking some good scalps in the process. And quite a few people obviously didn't expect that at the time. Willie Mullins went in with an 11-8 shot, Dino Blue, and she just kicked her aside along with everything else. Dino Blue ran no race, to be fair. But she then obviously went on to frank the form at Punchestown when finishing second in behind Brandy Love. And a lot of people just look at the form and say, well, Brandy Love's clearly the best. I'm not debating she could be, but I do think Love Envoy had a much harder season. And also I think you've got the Willie Mullins factored into that price. Willie Mullins is a master with mares, whether they're novices, hurdlers, chasers. Look at the records, he's winning all the races. So she obviously, they have the advantage that side. But you listen to connections and they fear nothing in this race. And they will be there, they will give their show. And I think she's looked better than ever this year. So I think the two progressive improving horses are still Marie's Rock and Love Envoy currently from what we've seen. Echoes and Rain, for me, it's just not a horse I've warmed to. I used to love her, but she's had so many chances. And while she's improved on the flat, and a lot of people thought she improved for her return, that Limestone Lad was awful. Like going off like Bob Ollinger's second favourite, like Bob Ollinger's just getting lapped each race now. He's just not the horse he once was. So, and she races too keenly. I'm not sure she'll see out the 2 mile 4. I think the Champion Hurdle would suit her much better, sat in behind those steaming off in front and running into a place in the Champion Hurdle. But you're double guessing Willie Mullins. So, in a short summary of that, next week you find out, see if Brandy Lovers entered. Honeysuckle and Epitante, for me, they're not. Well, Honeysuckle I think is regressive. Epitante might still be at the same sort of level, but she's not at the level she was. I think the two improvers are Marie's Rock and Love Envoy at 4-1 and 5-1. They're the two horses I backed anti-post at bigger prices. Well, Marie's Rock actually I took 3-1, but at the same time I've accepted that it's more than likely she could end up going to the stayers. If she goes to stayers, this race goes wide open. If she doesn't go to stayers, I think she's the one to beat by far. So it's just your choice. If you could get 4-1 non-runner, no bet, I wouldn't put anyone off that on Marie's Rock. As for Love Envoy, I don't think it's going to get any shorter unless Willie Mullins' Brandy Love doesn't appear next week. So that's something to look out for. This is why I'm doing this video now, is if Brandy Love doesn't get entered next week, she may still make the festival, but her price isn't going to get any shorter. She'll probably get bigger, but the others may get shorter if she's not declared. So you've got to be finger on the buzzer that if you want to get on Marie's Rock or a Love Envoy and stuff. But I think this is going to be competitive on the day. And with Honeysuckle sat at the front of the field, like she shouldn't be favourite for this race. So I think the value will still be there. But Marie's Rock's the bet if you can get the 4-1 non-runner, no bet. But she could still go to the stayers. So, on to the final two races of the day. So, the first one is the Boodles. And as I've flagged up, the Boodles is a juvenile handicap. And I flagged up on the weekend on Saturday in the 105, I think it was, at Nace. That race has thrown up three of the last four winners. But I went back and looked at the winners of that, and like especially like Brazil last year, like the winners that had won it in the past, like Aramax and stuff, they weren't winning it like a Boodles horse. They were winning this race like 5-10 lengths. They were absolutely bolting up. Whereas this weekend it was Sir Alan. Sir Alan got the better of who came second. I'm not sure. That's how important I thought it was. Sir Alan looked well beaten coming after the last, and then managed to get up on the line. Me personally, I don't see the same. I've seen people put up Sir Alan for that exact reason, and I respect that because of obviously the record of the race. But personally, the massive eye catcher in the race that I flagged up straight away on Twitter was Biker. Biker was 16-20 straight off the race. He was not knocked about, trotted around the back, very sneaky run, and you have to remember this is a handicap. So once you get to the number that you need to get in, and for the Irish, it's probably about £6 or £7 lower than what they need to get in because they'll get their English tax given to them anyway. They know they're in the race. They want as low weight as possible, and it's a little bit of a crooked race, but everyone's playing the same game. So at the end of the day, I think Biker's the one to take out of it. Have him. He wants to be on your radar. The downside of this now is obviously Biker was on everyone's radar because he's now 10-1. And this is why, again, going back to why I don't see it such a you want to be betting on the weekend, because I was too busy trying to keep an eye on everything at the same time. I didn't take that price at the time, and now he's sat at eights generally and tens. And I thought, is he going to get much shorter than that? Last year there was obviously a short price favourite in Gaelic Warrior, and then the rest of the field was 8-1 the field. Like Brazil, who had won that race, went off 8-1. So one of these may end up short. Another one who's obviously on the radar was Takao, who ran behind Lossiemouth and Galamasso, and she would have been ruined the fact that stablemate had ended up pushing Lossiemouth all the way to the back, because I think the plan was that if Lossiemouth had kept her position, she would have probably headed. She would have been in the golden spot to head home nicely. Galamasso would have followed in second. Takao could have just trotted home, but the problem was Takao ended up quite a bit in front of Lossiemouth with how many lengths she lost. And you saw when Takao drew around, you thought, hang on, he's got quite a lot in hand here. And then looking around thinking, Jesus, hurry up and get past me on Lossiemouth, because he doesn't want to finish in front of Lossiemouth and end up going up in the weights. So the cow's the obvious one, but it's 6-1. What's interesting here is in the next 4 weeks, there's going to be plenty of horses in the Boodles where they're like, say, French imports and stuff. And they're going to come across and they may have had, like, say, one run or no runs. Like, look at Willie Mullins this last year. Willie Mullins, Gaelic Warrior went there. And I think his mark was 129, which was absolutely insane. Bearing in mind, he just won off 151 or 152. So he could not have been more well in. And he came straight from France. They knew what he had and ran him here. And this is going to be very similar. You'll get trainers like a Paul Nicholls or whatever, and he'll have one or two. They'll be like, these are the two for the Boodles. So it's such a difficult race to predict, which is why Biker at 20s, yes. Biker at 8s, no. So wait for the day. If Biker's still 10 on the day or 12's on the day and you want to get involved then that makes sense. But it's just a race where everyone's smuggling. You don't know how much is left underneath, and there's plenty in here. So yeah, that's just keep an eye on. And for me, shortlist at the moment is Biker, obviously Takao, who's short enough. And Bo Zenith's interesting as well. Like, I just want to see him out, see what he can do, because his run last time, it's worth noting that Bo Zenith over in Ortel before he got bought, he beat Blood Destiny 3.5 lengths off level weights, and we've seen what Blood Destiny's done twice. And Bo Zenith ran once and was shown absolutely nothing. It was an awful run all round. Didn't run very well. Didn't jump. Didn't just look like a horse that was a 50-1 shot when he was sent. I think he's about 1-3. So scraping that, just forgetting about that. And on that same card, their race finished 4 seconds faster than what Lossiemouth did. And Lossiemouth wasn't getting any weight that day in the other race that she won, but even off the same weights, it just showed that obviously there's an engine underneath Bo Zenith. But where he goes, what he does, you just want to see him run. Because if he doesn't run, it's hard to question. Like, it's hard to want him to back unless it's like the best Boodles plot ever. But I think they bought him as a triumph horse because it was a lot of money. And then on to the final race of the day. I'm sure everyone's probably bored of me by now. Apologies, this was supposed to be a quick video, but I just like to try and get the point across, and I don't want to miss out on any sort of... I want to ensure that people get the depth that they deserve when I'm trying to explain a few things. And that's the National Hunt Chase. So where should we start? If we start with, right, Gold Cup Bailey, I don't know if he'll run. Manila Crooner, I can't imagine he's going to run. City Chief's an interesting runner, but I don't know whether that's the plan or not. The same with Mr. Coffee. Mr. Coffee, it sounded like this was going to be the plan. If he does end up here, one thing to note, I haven't got my notes offhand, but obviously when I started writing the blog, I was writing about the National Hunt Chase yesterday, was that Nicky Henderson, I don't think he's ever won this race. He's got something like 0 for 19 or something like that in this race. He's got a very, and he's gone in there with good horses, like thinking, oh, he's got a good chance. There's certain trainers that know how to target this race, and he's not one of them. So it's just worth bearing in mind. And he came out with the same the other day. He said, oh, we thought we should have won that race at Uttoxeter when he finished second. But he said that so many times about Mr. Coffee. He just, like the same with the handicap at the Cheltenham Festival, he just seems to always find a way to get himself beat. So he's got a massive chance, and he's clearly got a huge engine. He could be one of those that turns up in like a Grand National and wins that instead. But he's just, he's questionable for me. And they're both at 10 and 12 to 1. So over of the two, I prefer City Chief because he's unexposed. But the profile of the race suits Mr. Coffee very well. But it's just how much do you really trust him to go through it? It's not a short trip either, and he likes to clatter a fence here and there. He travelled beautifully last year at the Cheltenham Festival. On to Mile of Mission and Churchstone Warrior. Cover both of those two together. So Mile of Mission finished 60 lengths behind Chemical Energy at Cheltenham in the October meeting. Obviously, Mile of Mission had been off throughout the summer and coming back, as had Chemical Energy. So Chemical Energy came there fresh. They also, with Life in the Park was in the race, who went off the 10 to 11 favourite, ended up lapped and just was nowhere to be seen. Coming to probably about half a circuit to go, because obviously it was like a 3 mile plus race. They were all fairly in contention. It was a fairly close race, but as the screw started to get turned, Chemical Energy raced out wide, but he just continued to he jumped perfectly, he travelled very well, very strongly, and once the buttons started getting pushed on the other two, they just went out like a light, and obviously they weren't given a hard time because it was their first run back. So many have just wrote off that race altogether for Mile of Mission, and yeah, I can understand that. I think it's trying to find a line in between. Like at the end of the day, Chemical Energy did really put them to the sword, but at the same time, it was his first run back. He wasn't given a hard time, but for me, I find it hard to think that I know it was 60 lengths or whatever, and even if he was only say 70% fit, it's hard to see where he's turned that round. But that's just my personal preference. He has improved as he's gone along, but I was shocked to see him run last weekend in the 10 up because he was ready to go. He could have run in this. And the National Hunt Chase is a bit like the Gold Cup. You don't really want to be bottoming a horse by running them at 3 miles or 3 miles plus every single weekend. And having had a really good, impressive performance I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago when he won. He was back here again in the 10 up, which is a great novice chase prep for this race. But he had nothing to prove. He didn't need to be here. He could have been kept fresher, ready for the big one. So he ended up taking on Churchstone Warrior. Churchstone Warrior got the better of him in the finish. Churchstone Warrior is not the best of jumpers, but on the day he managed to put it together, and he managed to get the better of Mile of Mission by about a length. So there's not a lot between those two. I presume they both still go, even though they both had a very hard race. Obviously, the weekend just gone. It's only 4 weeks out. But I think that's been their idea all the way through. So I'd imagine they're both going to go. Going back to Chemical Energy, Gordon Elliott has got a phenomenal record in this race. Like, as in next level. Like, there is no trainer that's got a better record. Again, I haven't got the stats on me. But just thinking off the top of my head, obviously he won it with Galvin 2 years ago. In third was Ascaria 10. Last year he had Runwell Fred, who was sent off favourite, finished second behind No Forlorn Hope in Statler. So he knows what it takes to run this. And it's interesting that he hasn't got a lot else in here. Like, he's got Frontal Assault at 40s and Ida's Boy at 33s. So I can't imagine they're going to run. So his sole representative might well be Chemical Energy. Albeit on his sole run since that Cheltenham October meeting, it was bitterly disappointing because we knew he was going to need the run. He drifted in the betting. Everyone expected him to need the run. But it wasn't so much that as the issue. He just didn't jump that well. It was like he hadn't really been schooled too much. He'd been given an easy time. It was like you coming back off a holiday with all your mates, and you'd been on a few beers and then going back into football training on a Tuesday. Like, it's like you'd literally done nothing fitness wise or to get your head in the game, and you just turned up like having just been to McDonald's on the way there. Like, he just didn't look like the interest wasn't there, the jumping wasn't there. He made a race winning move, not to obviously win the race, but about 2 out, he loomed, no, about 3 out. He came into the race and he was very strong, and like Davey actively pushed him to the front to get him up level with the others, and up level with up near Ramillies. And at the time you thought, okay, yeah, that's good, and then he just blew up. So that's what I expected to happen. I expected him to do that latter end, for him to make a nice big like move of himself and then blow up. But I just didn't expect his jumping to be so sketchy. He travelled in snatches, so he was 1 minute he was on the bridle, then he was being nudged back into the bridle, then he was hard on the steel, then his jumping was good at some, and it just wasn't really like what I'd seen at the October meeting when he was in a rhythm. Have I written him off? Absolutely not. No, because Gordon Elliott knows what it's a bit like the cross country. He knows what it takes to win this race, and he's got so many horses over similar sort of trips that he could have tried to gear and engineer around to this sort of race. Generally, the races are they lack depth. They normally have plenty of runners but lack depth. Last year there was almost no runners, and it was a two-horse race from the off, which has been the same for the last few years. But this year, hopefully, we'll get a bigger field. Normally, it used to be like a mini national for amateurs. There'd be 10 plus runners. It'd be very hard to work out the winner, and you'd get like a JP horse that was getting well backed, and then like a 12-1 shot would win, and like you'd get a Patrick Mullins horse would go off at like, well, as usual, 6-4 or even money. But I do think Willie's starting to learn what it takes to win this, because he used to send really fragile, not so much fragile, but unexposed chasers here, having had one or two runs. But that's not the case anymore. So Chemical Energy, do they still have a chance? I think so. And he's 8-1, but is he going to get any shorter? Again, this is another race. This is why I'm trying to put these pointers out now, is so that if you start seeing horses dropping away or entries going, and like they say, I don't know, Marlow Mission and Churchstone Warrior aren't going to the race, then people like horses like Chemical Energy are going to start dropping in price. So if you want to take the 8s, then obviously then's the time. I think I got 9s or 10s. I mean, do I need to go in at 8s? Like, I wouldn't be topping up, but at the same time, if I didn't have a bet in a race, like 8s isn't the worst price. But at the same time, if it ends up, if like I'm looking at like 15 runners at the moment, if they ended up with 10 plus runners, he could end up being 8s on the day. So, or he could even be bigger. So it just depends on yourself. The other horse is Ramillies. Ramillies is at the front of the market. The interesting thing with that is obviously same connections. It's a Donnelly's own Ramillies, City Chief, and Galliard du Mesnil. So Ramillies is in reality, between Ramillies and Galliard du Mesnil, they look like the two best 3 miles and 3 mile plus horses for Willie Mullins, which one that doesn't say a lot about his current crop, because I don't think Sir Gerard's a 3 miler, but he might end up in it. I still have a hunch that he's going to end up in the 2 mile forward, appreciate it. But after James de Burley blowed out. So, but looking at those, he's got to decide of the three. The Donnellys have got to decide of the three who's going where. Is City Chief even going to come here or skip it altogether? And of the two at the front of the market, is it Ramillies or is it Galliard de Mesnil? Because in reality, your best one should probably be going to the Brown Advisory. But at the same time, I don't think Ramillies is good enough to win the Brown Advisory. But I'm also Ramillies would be one to take on, in my opinion, if he was a short price for this. He's always looked at a horse that would enjoy like 2 mile 4 to 3 miles, but he looked very stretched last time out, and I can't remember off the top of my head the horse that he got beat by. It's a horse that doesn't. The Devil's Coachman, I think it was. Devil's Coachman. I think it was that. Again, I'm just spitballing off the top of my head. He got beat in the finish because of the fact we didn't get beat. Actually, he finished in front, but he caused mass interference in order for it to be reversed. And that was the race that obviously Chemical Energy finished out the back of the TV. So whilst Ramillies has his chance, 5-1 is skimpy enough, and I would only be interested in him or even thinking about him if the favourite doesn't run. I think if the favourite wins, then if the favourite runs, it tells you enough that even if they run another one in the race, that they're probably a back number. I think Galliard du Mesnil, he's not the like sexiest horse. He's not the like most exciting horse, but he's consistent. Last year, he danced every dance. He finished third in the Brown Advisory behind La Home Press and Ahoy Senor, obviously both multiple Group 1 runners now. In fourth that day was Capodanno, who went on to Punchestown to take a Group 1. So the form around him's strong. He's picked up his own Group 1 this year. And the Group 1 that he actually picked up was demolishing. The race did fall apart. There was horses that unfortunately lost their lives. So it's not one where you're going to hang your hat on, and it was a horrible race. But the horse that finished second to him, 8.5 lengths, was Churchstone Warrior, who obviously just beat Marlow Mission. So on collateral form, then those two have got quite a bit to find. And considering they are second, third, fourth and fifth favourite in the race, and if they decide to run Galliard de Mesnil, they probably won't run Ramillies, so that's the second favourite gone. So that's Galliard de Mesnil with Chemical Energy, and then Mr. Coffee, and then City Chief. They might not run him because obviously that's their horse as well. And then you're up to Manella Crooner in 25-1. So in reality, if they only run Galliard de Mesnil, he's taken on two horses that collaterally he should already beat. Mr. Coffee, who I've said hasn't, the Nicky Henderson's got an awful record in the race. And then Chemical Energy, who I said has got a chance, but I don't put him on the same par as what Galliard de Mesnil is. So 13-8 is a more than fair price personally. People are talking. Some people have got this view that they think he's going to off 4-7. Other people have got this view that he'll be 6-4, 2-1 on the day. Me personally, I've got no idea. Obviously, anti-post we're on at it's either 6-1 or 8-1. I think it is anti-post, and he has got the strongest form. He's got the strongest form from last year. He's got the strongest form in context with these horses this year. And Willie's already said that he's his best chance of winning the Brown Advisory, let alone the National Hunt Chase. And I thought, but what really I find interesting for me is the fact that, as I said earlier, with horses like Mile Mission and Churchstone Warrior, they're having to race at the longer trip to gain the experience and get battle hardened. Whereas Galliard de Mesnil ran in the Irish National last year I think he was off top weight, finishing third behind Lord Lariat. So he has done all of that last year. So this year he's been kept to either 2 mile 4 or 3 miles. And even at the DRF, he was running at 2 mile 4, which is obviously too short, whether you're going for the 3 mile or the longer race. Sorry, not 2 mile 4, but like 2 mile 5, finishing behind Mighty Potter. And he did everything you'd want to be a National Hunt horse. He travelled okay, was in the race for most of it, and then he just plodded on into third. I think it was third or fourth in behind, without giving an overly hard time. For me, this step up in trip would be perfect for him. You know he's a solid jumper. You know he's going to run his race. You know he stays the trip. He's going to be on level weights of horses that he's already beaten. And he's a worthy favourite. I'm not going to stand there and say, yeah, lay into a 13-8, go and smash it up. But at the end of the day, I think the way this horse's prices will go off will depend on how the favourites do on the day. The reason he could end up short is because if all the other favourites go in and he's the last leg of an acca for like the majority of the public. Like when you look through a quick look at the day, you've got, if people have gone through whoever in the Supreme, but then picked the right one in the Arkle, the favourite, then you've got Constitution Hill, then the Mares, and then the National Hunt Chase. But in reality, I'm not sure how much short he could get, but does he have a favourite chance? 100%. I find it very difficult to see how you can knock the horse, because it's not like you're knocking like a 20-year-old. And the fact that if you looked at his Brown Advisory, I'd imagine, give me 2 seconds, I'll check his Brown Advisory price. I bet he's not far off being close to the favourites price-wise. So the Brown Advisory, he's now up to 10-1, but I bet you that's down to Mullins. A lot of people putting 2 and 2 together and thinking he won't run, but he was 5-1 not long ago. So for me personally, yeah, he's definitely got a favourites chance. So I'm just going to do a quick summary because obviously it has been long, so I do apologise. And I can't say that the other days will be any shorter. The only difference I'm going to do is I'm going to do the day 2 is actually going to be on Sunday. So I'm going to do them rotated because a lot of people are just going to be watching all the racing on the weekend. So I don't want to get in amongst that. So I'll wait until Sunday night will be when the day 2 comes out. And then day 3 and day 4 will come out in the early stages of next week. So in summary, Supreme Novices, if you've got a strong fancy already that's not Facile Vega, wouldn't put you off topping up in case he was to not run. If not, then just wait it out. It'll be 3 or 4-1 the field, and then you can pick and choose. You can either pick 2 or whatever, and 2, 3-1 shots still pay even money, and it gets you off to a winner on the day, rather than trying to scramble around, take a 5-1 shot that then goes off 8-1, and a 9-1 shot that goes off 4-1. I just don't think the value's there. The Arkle Chase, get your coin toss out. I'm not going to stand here and put you down to one, but just keep an eye on Dice Art Dynamo in the background. The Ultima, obviously we'll have a few, but Indigo Breeze is on the handicap radar once the marks come out. Champion Hurdle, if you've got something that you like outside of the first 2, like as I said, like a Pied Piper at 66-1, or I like to move at 66-1, that you'd be fairly confident of going here. Like say I like to move at wins on the weekend, and Twiston Davis says, oh, he's going here. If he's still sat at 50s, you could be like, hang on a minute, 50 is to get into third. So that would pay what? If it's caught the odds, say 50 odds, that would be 10-1 for him to come third. So it's just worth bearing in mind. Just keep your eyes open for that one. Mares Hurdle, so hard to predict until the big thing is finding out if Brandy Love's declared next week. And we won't know till a lot closer to time about Marie's Rock. But if Brandy Love isn't declared next week, you probably want to start getting your eggs in line to back the horses you want. Because if you get that, if the Betfair market starts moving, I always try and tweet it as quick as possible, and you start seeing the drift on then obviously, as usual, when there's smoke, there's fire, and she might well be ruled out. But at the same time, hopefully she'll be declared next week, and then you have to start working out how you're going to fit her in your team. Was she good and stuff like that next week? Boodles, as I said, not a massive fan of the winner of the race, Sir Alan, but I'm quite keen, obviously, to Cow 6-1 and Biker 10-1, but they're obvious enough, and there's going to be plenty to choose from, so there's no real rush with those. And we haven't got the marks. We don't know how much English tax they're going to get when they come across. National Hunt Chase, I've obviously backed Galileo de Mesno at 9s, and about either 6s or 8s, and Chemical Energy at 9s. I wouldn't put anyone off Chemical Energy, but do you need to back it? No, not really. But I do still have it strongly between Chemical Energy and Galileo de Mesno. The favourite has got such an obvious chance of winning that race, but the 13-8 tells you that. But a lot of the time you look at a 13-8 favourite and you can't understand why they're that price. They're too short. But I think that's more than fair. Just keep an eye on for runners, and all it takes is one tweet from Donnelly's. If the Donnellys came out, or one piece of news on at the races saying that their sole runner will be Galileo de Mesno, this market's going to collapse. Like Ramillies will be gone, who's second favourite, and City Chief, who is second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh favourite, will be gone as well. So if both of those go, you're going to be looking at an even money or an odds-on shot. So, and the same with Churchstone Warrior and Mile of Mission. They both had grueling races last weekend. So if one of them are injured or they've just had too hard a race and won't be going, this race could fall apart like that. So it's just being alert. If you want to take a price, go for it. But at the same time, 13-8 is not giving an awful lot away. But I also wouldn't put anyone off multiples. But you have to remember as well that 13-8, you'd want it non-runner, no bet. Because obviously he hasn't been confirmed himself yet either. It could be Ramillies that goes and he could run in the Brown Advisory. I don't think that'll be happening. I think he will go here. Right, so that's a summary, not short at all, so I do apologise. I hope you've enjoyed the content. If you can like below, and also obviously subscribe, because this is where all the videos are going to be coming. So the next video will be Sunday, as said, and obviously the first race for that day is the Ballymore. So the Ballymore is wide open at the moment. So if you've got a Ballymore fancy, chuck it on the bottom of this video, on the comments, and then I can obviously have a look at all of them. And if you've got any questions for that Wednesday, the Wednesday of the Cheltenham Festival that you want answered for any of the racing on that card, throw them on the bottom of this video, and I'll answer all the questions on the next video on Sunday. So look forward to speaking to you all Sunday, and cheers. It's getting close now, guys.